Pyra here, and... well, this is awkward. Let's put an end to that. This here is a state-of-the-art. It's that time machine. It formulates a topic that's embarrassingly topical, so you always have something trendy to converse about. Looks like it's forming something now.
Oh, that was lame. Don't get me wrong, I love talking about E3 1996 and October 2017 as much as the next guy, but come on, 97 and 98 are way in these days. But that kind of got me on an E3 1996 kick, so let's talk about the second annual Electronic Entertainment Expo. E3 1996 is one of the more important E3s that never happened, and I say this because this is one of the harder years in the event's history to find footage from. Yet it contains a good bit of the major events in gaming history. Now that's in terms of all the press conferences though. The only one that is clearly available is a good chunk of Nintendo's, with only a little snippets from Sony's and like no others. So while with my other E3 episodes we mainly just looked at the conferences, with 96 we'll be taking a look at each company's offerings on the show floor, as well as everything we could gather from their press events and see how many knee slaps out of 5 they deserve for their showings. E3 1996 started on May 16th and ended on May 18th, and this was a big year for everybody, which is what everybody says relating to every E3, but this time it really was. The Sega Saturn was already considered a train wreck, so Sega had to prove the worth of its new flagship console. Nintendo had the Nintendo 64 on the way, but the system experienced numerous delays, so at this point, Nintendo really had to show off why this thing was taking so long. Also, the Virtual Boy was discontinued in North America a few months before the show, only after 7 months of being on the market, so with the Virtual Boy being the Virtual Boy, Nintendo had to bring the goods. Sony, however, was experiencing quite a bit of success with the newly released PlayStation. They now had to prove it was a growing console with a bright future ahead of it. Nintendo came out swinging at this year's E3. Their conference mainly focused on a demo of Super Mario 64. Now, the crowd doesn't go bonkers, but you can tell they're watching in awe. This was a great demo showing off just how special the N64 was. We have this promotional VHS tape to look at though, which was made for press and investors. I don't believe this was supposed to be shown to the public. A lot of it seems like it could have been, but at the very end, the video talks about how much money Nintendo will sink into marketing, so I'm gonna assume this wasn't readily available to consumers. The first thing shown off is a scissor reel of upcoming Nintendo 64 games, and this is really interesting. Not only is it a ton of heavy-hitting titles, but it's just cool to see early builds of these games with temporary titles and logos. Kirby's Air Ride was originally a very early Nintendo 64 game, which I always found very interesting, and Star Fox 64 had a logo more akin to the SNES original. Speaking of the SNES, Nintendo hadn't forgotten about that sucker because they delved deep into the titles launching in 96, including Mario RPG, Tetris Attack, Kirby Superstar, and Donkey Kong Country 3. Not a bad lineup for a console on the way out. They also announced a revision of the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Pocket. 96 was an incredibly busy year for Nintendo, and that is exemplified by this marketing budget section at the end.
Nintendo has a great lineup of second-half Super NES and Game Boy games backed by the power of the Play Loud advertising campaign.
Nintendo Power Source Online reaches opinion leaders to get the news out fast on hot new releases.
The tiny little Game Boy Pocket gets a great big $6 million campaign.
Whoa, what? Let me tell you, this guy can sell me anything.
In-store merchandising and interactive displays are the keys to announcing the arrival of new releases, helping consumers get hands-on experience with the hottest games ever.
Nintendo announced that the Nintendo 64 would launch that September for $250, and honestly, that's not bad. Overall, a really good show from Nintendo this year, a metric 8 gallons worth of awesome games and spread out across their 3 consoles at the time. This is definitely one of their better showings. Sega really had to bring its A game at this E3 after the abysmal launch of the Sega Saturn, and gosh damn it they tried. They brought a lot of heavy-hitting titles, Nights into Dreams, Panzer Dragoon 2, Fighting Vipers, and the big one, Sonic X-Treme, the game that was supposed to save the Saturn that was cancelled hard. Sega announced a price cut for the Saturn from $399 to $199 after Sony slapped them in the face with a $299 price announcement for the PlayStation at E3 1995, and then proceeded to announce a price cut to $199 at this year's. Sega did a decent job at trying to bring the Saturn back to where they wanted it, but failed to make as big of a splash as they desperately needed to. Third-party support wasn't nearly as strong as Sony's offerings, and the lineup paled in comparison to Nintendo's. E3 1995 may have been the beginning of the end for Sega as a first party, and E3 1996 didn't bode that much better for them. Sony decided that Sega wasn't dead enough, so they decided to announce a price cut for the PlayStation. Originally starting at $299, which absolutely obliterated the Saturn's launch price of $399, Sony announced a cut to $199, which in addition to showing off games like Crash Bandicoot and Twisted Metal 2, truly showed off how serious Sony was about the gaming industry. They were willing to play hardball, which Sega definitely was starting to see. And that was about it for Sony. They showed off some big titles and dropped the price of their console. Not much to talk about because, 1, their full press conference was eerily hard to find, and 2, they really didn't have much riding on them. They were doing extremely well already and just had to keep up the momentum, and they did just that. E3 1996 was a really cool show. 95's show was much more based on hardware, and even then it didn't seem like companies had many games to show off. This year was all about the games, and while it must have been incredibly exciting back when it actually happened, this E3 was still really fun to look back on just because of the sheer amount of games announced and on the show floor. Games that were to become instant classics, games that never came out, games in their early stages. This E3 truly had it all, both at the time and retrospectively. E3 1996 was pretty cool overall, and oh, that must be the some guys talking about E3 1996 in October 2017 alerts. Let's be honest, if you're talking about E3 1996 right now, it sounds like you're up to something. Yeah, I don't blame them in the slightest for being wary of me.